Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Danny Phantom. Okay, so this episode, Girls Night Out, is essentially what it says in the box. Essentially the episode Girls Night Out is about how, Danny is unfortunately away from Amity Park on a father-son bonding trip, which winds up being an upbeat plot throughout the episode, so I will split the episode. As per usual when I do these kinds of reviews, I will split the episode up into the A plot and B plot when I do those kinds of things. But, essentially the story is that Danny is now away from home, which conveniently causes most of his women villain to show up, and it causes most of his villainous to show up when he's gone and start wreaking havoc on Amity Park, which naturally the girls that Danny's team consists of have to solve the problem. So it's a pretty interesting episode. I do like it, but in case the episode does open up with what we find out is the episode opens up with Danny fighting Johnny 13, and Danny initially comments on the fact that Johnny seems to be working alone and asking him what happened to his shadow. At which point he's cut off because Johnny 13's shadow suddenly intercepts him and sneak attacks him. And of course, at this point where Danny demands to know what exactly it is they want, but Johnny then reveals that he's not actually there for any particular reason. In actuality, he came to seek out Danny because, well, essentially what happened was, as we find out, Johnny and Kitty are having a bit of a falling out. They are having some difficulties in the relationship, and he proceeds to ask Danny what he does when he and Sam get into a fight, because he believes that Sam and Danny are boyfriend and girlfriend. And Danny, of course, has no real comment. In fact, he kind of stutters a little bit because he's not entirely sure what he and Sam are at this point in the story. But he does eventually tell Johnny to go home, pointing out that he can either go home willingly or Danny can make him go home. So Johnny, of course, realizing he's not going to get any sort of advice out of Danny, does decide to leave, and also quickly discovers that he's made things awkward, so he just leaves. But with Danny commenting, pointing to the shadow, to, in his own words, take the dork of darkness with him. And the shadow gets mad at him, but ultimately does leave alongside Johnny, with Danny swatting it on the butt with a laser for good measure. But in any case, since at this point we're after Johnny 13 leaves, we do see Skulker hanging around, and what we find out is that apparently he and Ember are boyfriend and girlfriend, but we do find out that their relationship isn't very stable. As we find out, the only thing we know about their relationship is that Ember thinks that Skulker is a lousy hunter, claiming that he can't even find the TV remote, which is very relatable but also kind of mean. But and also we find out that Kitty is having a fight with Johnny 13 because she claims that he loves his bike more than her, and of course he's admitted multiple times that that's not true. He does. They have a bit of a rocky relationship, but he does love her. But of course, ultimately the person who ultimately is forced to deliver this kind of news about how both Skulker and Johnny 13 have left to Amity Park to blow off steam is unfortunately Bertrand. Bertrand and also Penelope Spectra is there as well. And Bertrand does point out that he points out that they just really did piss off their boyfriends. He openly admits that. And Spectra is pissed off on Bertrand's behalf because unfortunately we find out that Bertrand was not allowed to come along with, which is why he came back to tell them. And this of course causes Kitty to become so mad that she uses one of her ghost powers, a banishing kiss, which as we find out, gets rid of any men that comes in contact with it. And this causes Bertrand to suddenly disappear. And of course, Ember is a little confused as to what's happened, but at which point Kitty makes a joke at her expense about how she's not the only one who can drive away men, which of course makes Ember pissed off at her. It's kind of sarcastically pissed off at her, but then does legitimately ask her what happened. And Kitty explains that she banished him to another dimension. Doesn't know where she went, doesn't know where he went, but what she does know is that after 12 hours, if he's still gone, he stays gone. So, of course, she has no idea what's going. Of course, Spectra. Of course, at this point, she demonstrates her ability to bring people back from the other dimension by using her banishing kit, undoing the banishing kit she put on Bertrand, which causes him to wonder if there's a 12-hour sale somewhere. With Spectra commenting that they were only 11 hours and 58 minutes away from him disappearing for good, but does admit that this will be an interesting idea, and deciding to go blow off steam themselves. Ember, Kitty, and Spectra all decide to go to Amity Park. So, yeah, that winds up being the main conflict of the episode. But in any case, the reason I say that Danny isn't available to help fight them, even though he's, funnily enough, on the title card fighting them, even though he never actually fights them, he is actually going on a fishing trip with his father. He is planning to leave to, he's getting into the RV with his father, and Sam is a little bit skeptical about what's going on, but you do find out that Jack claims reading from a book. I should mention he's reading from a parenting book. That it'll be a fun father-son bonding experience, and that's pretty much the main reason they're going. With Danny adding that's a father-son thing, and that they wouldn't understand. But it's at this point where where Jazz appears with a Fenton thermos in hand. And gives it to Danny, and Danny, of course, points out that they probably won't need it, but does appreciate it either way. But does tell Sam and Tucker and also Jazz that they need to keep their eyes peeled to keep Amity Park safe. Pointing out that he's going to be gone for a while, so they do need to do something. So they do need to keep Amity Park safe from any threats until he gets back, which. Of course they do, but or they agree to. But Sam is not particularly happy about the fact that Jazz is part of their team, and Jazz also starts referring to their little group as the Ghost Getters, which of course Sam doesn't really like the name, and we do find out that the reason Sam doesn't like Jazz being part of their group is because it's always been her and Tucker, and they've always done really good at it all by themselves. So she admits that. So she claims that they don't really need Jazz, but ultimately it's not really up to them. And meanwhile, we see Ember, we see Danny and Skulker and his father leave with Skulker in tow. Pointing out that with Skulker claiming that he thinks it'll be fun to hunt a moving target. But in any case, it's at this point where the episode kind of breaks up into an A plot and a B plot. So I will follow the B plot first. So in any case, this story is about the camping trip. That is about the trip that Sam and his father Danny and his father go on. And they go to Lake Erie, the not famous one, with 2 E's. And there's an obvious pun there because Lake Erie is extremely creepy. That is essentially the story of it. It is just an extremely creepy place with Jack being unable to place why it's called that. But in any case, they do sit on the boat for a bit, trying to catch fish. Which of course we do find, and of course Jack tries to make small talk with Danny. He tries to use his father-son bonding book to try and find topics to talk with Danny with, and of course Danny quickly picks up that he's reading from a book, and Jack, kind of at a loss on how to actually proceed, he stumbles over his words for a bit, but eventually decides to ask what's going on between Danny and Sam, and this of course causes Danny to once again become flustered because he doesn't really have a good response. He is honestly not entirely sure how to respond to that. He's just very, very flustered. But it's at this point where as they're bonding, Jack eventually falls asleep on the boat, and we do find out why. It's a recurring bit throughout the episode. But they fall asleep waiting for the fish to bite, and Danny is kind of a little bit bored out of his mind. But then he sees Skulker trying to attack them, and quickly discovers that he needs to find a way to go ghost while also spending quality time with his father. So what he does is he rocks the boat to make it look like he fell in, at which point he changes into his ghost mode while underwater, and then tells Skulker to go away because he's scaring the fish. But Skulker merely responds that he doesn't fish, he hunts. At which point, he and Danny get into a bit of a fight on the beach, and it's at this point where Danny proceeds to wonder why exactly Skulker is there in the first place. And what we find out is that Skulker, in an effort to kind of please, and he doesn't say and refer to Ember by name, but he says that his girlfriend says he's a lousy hunter, so he's come to hunt Danny and add his spell to his wall to kind of change her mind on that, which of course causes Danny to utter a wow. And of course, Skulker points out that yeah, it's pretty messed up that she thinks he's such a bad hunter. But Danny proceeds to correct himself, pointing out that he's actually surprised that Skulker has a girlfriend, which he remarks just hers. But in any case, Danny is able to successfully break one of Skulker's weapons and proceeds to knock him away. Long enough for Danny to return back to where the capsized boat was, with his father looking around for him, and he comments that it's fine. But and of course, Jack, satisfied that his son is okay, does turn the boat back over, and they return to fishing. Where Danny proceeds to continue fishing while his father falls asleep again, and we do find out why. It turns out he drinks aerosol cheese from a can, and that keeps knocking him out throughout the episode. But of course, the next episode is the next thing that Skulker tries is to use a series of weapons under the water to try and create a massive hurricane, that just creates a massive typhoon that lifts the boat up in the air. And Danny quickly figures this out, so he immediately jumps into the water and immediately uses his ghost rays to shut down Skulker's fan and once again send him off on his own. With Danny then proceeding to climb back into the boat, claiming that there was some sort of rainstorm that Jack just missed while he was passed out. And Jack admits that maybe he should stop eating softy cheese, pointing out that it does knock him completely out, at which point he eats more softy cheese and knocks completely out. But in case it is at this point where Danny in the final phase of his plan while he's just kind of waiting for fish to show up, and then the fish winds up jumping into the boat and jumping out of the boat while Jack is trying to tell his son to remark that it was this big. They did technically catch a fish, but not really. But it's at this point where Skulker then shows up on a giant sea monster and successfully capsizes their boat. And Danny proceeds to ask Skulker if this is the girlfriend he's heard so much about, which of course Skulker takes offense to, but admits that Danny would be surprised how many surprising things he finds when he hunts. At which point the sea monster eats Danny, and Danny calls for his father as he's being eaten. But and Jack immediately springs into action because, as previously established, his ghost hunting prowess comes out when his family's in danger. So he immediately jumps into action, not only knocking Skulker off the sea monster, but using his can of softy cheese to blind the monster and send it rampaging into the shores, which of course knocks it out and enables them to quote unquote catch a fish. While Skulker again tries to use his weapons to destroy them now that he's without his sea monster. But Jack quickly deals with Skulker as well by using his fishing line to rip the head off of Skulker's ectoskeleton, which causes Skulker to forcibly eject from his ectoskeleton. And at which point Jack sees how big Skulker actually is as a ghost, picks him up, and then remarks that it's too small and they'll have to throw it back. At which point he passes it to Danny, who sucks him into the vented thermos. And Danny remarks that was actually really cool. And of course his dad remarks that it was nothing and that's just what he does. But and then admits that now they actually have quite the fishing story to tell when they get home. But the point of mentioning gesturing toward the giant sea monster that they just landed, but does wonder why they call it Lake Erie, which is a funny little joke. But in any case, time for the A plot. So of course we continue on with the idea that obviously Sam is still visibly annoyed about the fact that Jazz is tagging along with him, and we also find out that Jazz doesn't even have the proper equipment, and And of course, Jazz is dressed to the nines for any possible scenario, but she isn't wearing a Fenton Spectre deflector, which and Tucker gives her his, pointing out that it is a must-have for leaving the house, pointing out that it protects them from ghost energies. So it is very important to keep everybody safe. But in case it's at this point where they see Johnny 13 hanging out in the park. He came back. He either left and came back, or has been there despite Danny telling him to leave. But we don't find out which is which. But it's at this point when he is trying to flirt with girls, as per usual. When Kitty, Ember, and Spectra show up, and Kitty is of course very pissed off at Johnny for seemingly cheating on her, pointing out that he left to blow off steam and instead flirting with what as she puts it, worthless girls. At which point, Johnny proceeds to point out that it's not true and that he puts it incorrectly and understands that he fucked up, but he does point out that she's the only worthless girl he needs, which of course he realizes he didn't put quite right, so which only makes her madder. But in any case, meanwhile, Ember is currently drawing the crowd, because as we find out from her debut episode, she has since somewhat retained her fan base. Case in point, both Dash and Quan come up to her, and with Dash remarking that he's her biggest fan and he loves her music, while Quan claims that he loves her music more. At which point, the two boys get into a fight over who's the bigger fan of Ember. With Quan then revealing that Dash, in a public place, might I mention, that Dash likes listening to boy bands in his spare time, which of course Dash remarked that Quan he promised he would never tell another living soul about. At which point the two of them, continue to fight, and of course they continue to draw a crowd because obviously everybody is a big fan of Ember, and Ember, and this of course causes an interesting reaction to happen. Ember gets frustrated with the fact that there's so many guys, as we find out, this Kitty then proceeds to try and use her banishing kiss on Johnny to teach him a lesson about cheating on her. And this, of course, Ember tries to drown out the noise of all the men so that she and Spectra don't have to listen to it. And in the process, Kitty's banishing kiss combined with Ember's music causes the banishing kiss to affect the entire town, erasing every single man in Amity Park. And of course, quickly realizing the problem, they immediately realize that's two of them and it's only one ghost. So they have three ghosts that they need to deal with, and they're now down to Tucker because of the banishing kiss. So they need to recruit a third member to deal with Ember, Kitty, and Spectra. And to this point where they decide that the only other place to go is to go to their house, where of course they quickly discover that their mother was unaffected by the banishing kiss, as well as Ember's music, with Ember kind of using it to kind of mind control all of the girls in Amity Park as well. So which is interesting. But in any case, they do realize that Maddie has been excitedly working on her own inventions for a change, because as we find out in this episode, she never gets to do that. Unfortunately, she spends a lot of her time fixing Jack's inventions to make sure they work, which is, a recurring thing, and it does explain why a lot of his inventions seemingly don't work. Jack makes most of them, and Maddie has to fix some of them. But she then reveals that she actually does have a gadget that she's inventing, but she doesn't know the name yet. She hasn't figured that out. But of course, Jazz is happy that her mom is working on her own inventions, but does admit that, and also realizes that the lab has effectively shielded Maddie from the effects of Ember's music, so that she isn't mind controlled. So realizing that they need a third, they do recruit Maddie to help them out, pointing out that trio of ghosts has banished everybody, and they only have 12 hours to get everybody back. And of course, Maddie quickly realizes that they need to spring into action, at which point Jazz starts to propose a plan, but Sam cuts her off, claiming that she has a better one, pointing out that she's been at it a long time, and she believes that her plan is going to ultimately be better than Jazz's, which of course we wind up isn't true, and we'll get to that. But she then proceeds to propose that they each split up and take on a ghost, with Maddie taking on Spectra, Sam taking on Kitty, and what is it? And Jazz taking on Ember, and they proceed to split up and do that. Maddie tries to infiltrate a cooking show that Spectra has taken over and is now hosting, and of course she tries to sneak in, but Spectra quickly notices her and even invites her to be a guest on the show. Which of course surprises Maddie, because she points out that she's never been invited to anything like this. But we then find out that Spectra, there's a bit of a twist, because Spectra reveals that she's going to be taking good lessons from their in-studio homemaker, which of course immediately causes Maddie to fear the worst. And sure enough, we find out that Mrs. Manson is actually the person that Spectra's invited, and of course we find out that Maddie is not. We already established that Maddie's not a big fan of her, so that winds up being a problem. But meanwhile, we find out that Ember is debuting a new song, Girls Night Out, which fit with the episode. But of course, Girls Night Out. But of course, we find out that she has recruited Jazz to be one of her backup singers for Girls Night Out, and Jazz is obviously trying to catch Ember. But in the process, she accidentally upsets Ember's rhythm, which pisses off the crowd, and they all throw crap at her. And finally, Sam tries to sneak through a. Finally, Sam tries to sneak her way through a army recruitment thing that's Kitty is running, but and of course Kitty does take note of Sam's physical prowess and does point out that she's very strong and very fast, but and does admit that she'll make a perfect partner for somebody that she believes has never had a sparring partner, which of course Sam wonders what exactly is going on, but then there's just this big burly woman who just picks her up and beats her to a pulp, which unfortunately Sam's plan does not work, and of course it is at this point where obviously they return to the emergency ops center, where they then proceed to formulate a plan, pointing out that they spent 10 of their 12 hours trying to figure out how to get all the guys back, and they admit they have no real idea of how to actually do any of this, but and of course it's this point where Sam points out that she's got another plan, but Jazz immediately interrupts her, but which Sam immediately takes offense to, pointing out that obviously she thinks she's better than Jazz at this because she's been at it longer. But Jazz also points out that Sam's plan failed spectacularly, so she obviously needs a second opinion, and really realizing, and of course Maddie does side with her daughter, telling Sam that they absolutely need to hear her out, and of course Sam ultimately relents, at which point Jazz explains her plan. She realizes that Sam's a bit, that's obviously, she points out that she knows that's Ember and Kitty had to combine their powers to create the Vanishing Kiss, so she proceeds to admit that they're going to need to find a way to trick them into doing the Vanishing Kiss again. And realizing that the only way to do that is to convince them that there's one boy that they missed in town, which of course then wonder who's going to disguise themselves as the boy, at which point they both turn to Sam, and Sam is annoyed, but she does it, at which point she dresses up in she dresses up in Danny's clothes, and of course the girls are celebrating because they've been using the 12 hours they've been given to blow off some steam without men. So they're both pretty excited about that. But of course this is at this point where they discover Sam in her boy disguise, who immediately walks up on stage, makes a big play of being a gross, disgusting man. At which point Spectra scolds Kitty, wondering why her Banshee Kiss failed to miss one. While Kitty points out that it was ultimately Ember's music that amplified her kiss, and she had no way of knowing what the range was. So, and of course, realizing that they need to use one again, they then proceed to realize that they're going to need to make another Vanishing Kiss to make sure all of the men are gone forever now, which of course plays directly into Jazz's plan, because Jazz, using Maddie's new invention that she created, this uses it to reverse the polarity of ghost energies, which is exactly what the device was designed to do. And of course, it works. It returns all of the men back to normal and restores them back to reality. With Ember, Kitty, and Spectra realizing they've been tricked as Sam returns back to her normal clothes, and quickly realizing that Kitty needs to make another banishing kiss. She immediately does it, but Sam quickly arms up into a Fenton ghost peeler and immediately faces off against Kitty, and with Jazz ultimately sucking her inside. And now without their ability to banish men again, the fight essentially becomes very one-sided. Although they are able to successfully capture Ember as well in a quick confrontation. While Spectra does give Maddie some trouble, but since it's 301, she's easily defeated as well. And of course, Maddie winds up getting knocked into some trash, which she winds up having to clean off of herself. But of course, at this point where Sam does wind up swallowing her pride and does admit that Jazz did make a pretty good team leader for the time being. She does admit that Jazz obviously does that there is some merit behind Jazz's ability to hunt ghosts, and admits that maybe she should listen to her a little bit more. And it's at this point where they then proceed to go back to the house where. Obviously, Danny and his father have returned home and have had a great bonding experience. They come home with a giant sea monster in tow, and of course, Maddie is currently in the process of de-trashing herself. And Jack, of course, does show her the massive thing they caught. With Maddie pointing out that Jack is ultimately going to be responsible for descaling it and cleaning it so they can actually eat it. And Maddie but then proceeds to ask Danny how it was with his father, and he admits that it was actually kind of fun, and that Dad's actually a pretty good guy once you get to know him. So he admits that he had a lot of fun bonding with his father, which is great. But it's at this point where Sam and Jazz walk in and are now visibly fast friends. They start talking up strategies for the next time ghosts invade Amity Park. And also ask Maddie if she wants to come for ice cream, pointing out that they're going to celebrate. And of course, Danny immediately wonders what exactly happened while he was gone, but admits that they just had a bit of a bonding experience of themselves, you could say. And of course, Jack, happy that everybody had a productive bonding weekend, does point out that now it's time that now he just needs to find a place to put the monster in the freezer, with the monster visibly showing a visible eye of concern. But in case, that's how the episode ends. So first and foremost, I don't want to talk about something. I have talked about Johnny 13 and how he goes from evil to kind of semi-neutral and throughout the series. Kitty, but I want to have a comment on is how Kitty kind of does the opposite. She starts off as neutral by virtue of the fact that she's not really in her debut episode all that much. But as time goes on, she becomes more evil. She starts blackmailing Danny, and obviously in her next episode appearance, she successfully banishes all men from Amity Park for almost 12 hours and almost erases them all from existence. That is pretty damn evil. But the episode's fun because it's a fun A plot B plot thing, which I review sometimes, and I like that. But overall, I do like the episode. It is fun, but it is interesting that Ember and Skulker are in a relationship, even though they're never seen interacting. But I'm getting the feeling they're gonna break up in between episodes. Let's be perfectly honest. They had a very unstable relationship. If the only thing we know about it is that Ember thinks very lowly of Skulker's hunting abilities. So I don't see them being boyfriend and girlfriend. In the very next episode, they appear together. I can honestly say that they will probably not be together for very long. But in any case, that isn't ultimately going to do it for today's review. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Speaking of Discord, we are having our watch along this weekend, this Sunday. If you have not followed me on the Discord server yet, please go do that. Go join the Discord server. We are doing a watch along this Sunday. I would appreciate it. I would appreciate the support because I don't do many of these, and I would like to do them more often. So definitely go check those. Check out the watch along if you have not. And also, be sure to go and check out my Twitch. Link is down in the description as well. Please go check that out. I stream Saturdays and Sundays. We are not going to be doing a horror game this weekend, unfortunately, because both something that came up, and both because of because of the watch along. But I do hope you guys will go and hang out at the watch along regardless, because that's going to be fun. And also follow me, because I'm trying to push for affiliate, so please go do that as well. And also, finally, if you want to support me, again, go check out my Patreon. Only a couple bucks a month. It does help me out. Please go check that out. I would appreciate the support. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the playlists linked in the end screen. The top playlist is the most recent playlist that I've done of these. It was Megas month. I did that one for my birthday. It was Megas XLR themed. Please go check that one out. I would appreciate it. I would also be sure and go and check out my the bottom one as well, whereas the bottom one is Courage Month. I reviewed Courage the Cowardly Dog for Halloween 2 years ago, so please go check that one out. And but in any case, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and also next time I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!